Today's lesson, Life in Europe Post-Industrialization, will focus on the time period, roughly about 1850 and after, where we went through industrialization within Europe, and we've learned about the headache and the strife and all the changes that were taking place, between the late 1700s and even if we say 1848. Life was very difficult as there was so much change within society at this time. Today's lesson will focus on basically the people in Europe post-industrialization. The first thing I want to talk about is the distribution of income at this time in European history. By 1850, working conditions were improving and wages were increasing. This is important to note. Remember, we've been talking about this for a long time, where the people were struggling. There was so much change happening so rapidly within Europe. By 1850, things were starting to kind of settle in. Conditions were better, wages were increasing at this time. So industrialization definitely brings some benefits to people, and over time help the people who are most in need. However, we need to keep in mind, income was far from distributed equally at this time. There was a huge gap between these classes with this bottom class within society. The bottom 30% of all households received only about 10% of all income. 10%. That's rough. It's hard to really save and make a decent living at this time, but remember, keep in mind, it is better than what they've experienced during the industrializing years within Europe. Society had not split into two sharply defined social classes. Remember, Karl Marx predicted this, and he also predicted that it was only a matter of time before that lower class, the working class over here, before they decide to rebel against capitalism and overthrow it to put their own type of government in place and form of economy. So also it's important to note that class hierarchy was confused, preventing any groups to really band together. And we're going to focus on that during this lesson. These groups, they were pretty different, even though they're all in a difficult predicament, being within the bottom of the economic hierarchy. They're still not really motivated to band or work together. So we'll focus on that a little bit later. But it is important to know that income distribution is, very widespread at this time. There's a huge discrepancy in wealth. Right, at this point, let's talk about the middle classes of society in Europe at this time. The middle class of the late 19th century was diverse and layered with various subclasses. So as we see over here, we don't have just one middle class. We have a layered middle class featuring the upper middle and lower middle class. So a little bit of information about all three. Starting out with the upper middle class, this consisted of the very successful banking families, industry, and large-scale commerce. So this upper middle class, again, bankers, some of the most affluent people who are really coming out of this industrialized time period, increasing their wealth at this time. The upper class and members of the upper middle class would often commingle. So if you're in this upper class, oftentimes you're going to commingle with the aristocracy of the time. It was just one of those things that I think we see this often, where the lower class often wants to be part of that higher next class. And we definitely see that with the middle class aspiring to kind of move up the social ladder at this time. It's also important to point out that the upper middle class, in years past, that they would have had a lot of issues with the land-owning aristocracy. Right now, they kind of want to be part of them. They want to kind of blend in and kind of, be one and the same. And the aristocracy is okay with this too, because frankly, some of them, they're going to need money in this new industrialized class of the upper middle class. They've got a lot of money. They've made piles of money through industrialization, so we're going to see the mingling of this class with the aristocracy. All right, let's talk a couple minutes about the middle class. They were moderately successful professionals. This class, we see groups like lawyers, doctors, merchants, etc. They lacked great and significant wealth, but they're pretty well off. They've got money, they just don't have the piles and piles of money that some of our upper middle class people would have had. This group was also growing in scope, where they have new fields who are coming into this middle class, such as architects, accountants, and chemists. So overall, growing in magnitude at this time. The last group within this middle class would be our lower middle class. More entered into this level and sought to increase their status within society. We have dentists moving into this social class. We also have nurses, and we have the school teacher. All of them kind of rising up to make it into this middle class of society, albeit in the lower middle class. Also important to note that each group sought to distinguish themselves with this new status. And what I mean by that is the lower class, of course, they're going to want to seem like they're moving up. And we're also going to see this middle class want to seem like they're moving up. And the same thing with the upper class. So this aspiration of moving up the social hierarchy could serve as a way to kind of keep all these people in check and keep them in line if they aspire to move up that social ladder. No really reason to band together with any other one, where right now they just kind of want to set themselves apart or move into that higher social stratus. Let's talk for a minute about middle class culture and values. So as we focused the last picture slide about the middle class, we know that they're very diversified. There's the upper, the middle, the lower middle class. So what are some of their cultures and values? Well, a certain style in life loosely united the middle class. And it's kind of interesting to think, what are some of the things that might unite various classes today? Well, the things that loosely united this middle class, 4 categories: food, housing, clothing, and culture and leisure activities would definitely serve that purpose. So starting out with food, we see about 25% of income at this time, roughly, would be spent on food and drink. Obviously an important part of society. Of course, we need to eat, but it definitely transcends that, where different foods that one eats, and also the process and the dinner parties, and it certainly tells someone about your culture from this process. So, like I said, about 25% of income was spent on food and drink. The dinner party was one of the favorite social occasions of this time. So the more money you had, simply the more dinner parties you might throw, the bigger dinner parties. Some people might throw 1 to 2 dinner parties a week, which could get pretty pricey, where if you were of maybe the lower middle class or the middle class, you might host 1 or 2 a month. But the dinner party was one of those important aspects of society. Also, the greater the family's income, the greater number of servants. So we definitely see this at this time within society. Next, a little bit of information about housing. Many people rented rather than owned their houses at this time, and another popular aspect of society was to own or rent your own beach house, for your seasonal house, where you can just kind of get away when the weather is okay with that. You can just kind of go to your beach house and spend a month or 2 there. And of course, we still have many people today who share that same value, wanting their house, whether it's in the summer or winter, where they could get away for a little bit. We also know that clothing is going to be important at this time to kind of show different class distinction. The cost of clothing was radically reduced as a result of industrialization. This is something that we've talked about in the past. 100 years before, buying an extra pair of underwear or any type of outfit would be out of the question. It was just too much money. Where post-industrialization, we see now all of a sudden it's affordable. So clothing is becoming more and more important. Also, displaying the latest fashion is becoming important as well. Definitely setting apart the different classes at this time. The last thing to discuss on the side with middle class culture and values would be some of the leisure activities and various cultural attributes at this time. Many people in the middle class would look to books, music, and travel for leisure activities and culture. There was also a strict code of behavior and morality. Certain things like stressing hard work, self-discipline, and personal achievement were all important aspects to have within your character. The middle class, especially as you climb that hierarchy with the upper and middle class, drunkenness and gambling were denounced. We see this, even within our country as we, adopted the 18th Amendment, which prohibited alcohol. We see this middle class value of kind of looking down upon those who are getting drunk within society. Also, sexual purity and fidelity were celebrated virtues of the middle class at this time. Next, let's talk about the people and occupations of the working class of society. So, at this time, about 4 out of every 5 people belonged to the working class, so the majority of people within Europe would fall into this working class. Many people were moving to these cities where jobs within industry were available, and this is obviously something very important to keep in mind. 100 years before, of course, most of the people, the great majority, would be working within fields, on farms, within agriculture. With the population explosion and the agricultural revolution, this makes this possible. So now we have a lot of people working within different fields and industries at this time within Europe. We also see, as a result, a hierarchy within the working class of highly skilled, semi-skilled, and unskilled workers at this time. And all 3 groups, of course, are going to be very important to the lifeblood of the European industry. Not much unity among the working class at this time. There just wasn't a lot of unity between these groups of people. And that kind of makes sense. We talked about this before. They want to be up here. They want to be up here. And it makes sense that they're basically going to do things to separate themselves from the other groups. So, why don't they all just kind of band together and, try and overthrow the system? Remember, they're living better than they were, 20, 30 years before. But life is still pretty rough for this group of people. Why don't they overthrow the system like Marx predicted? Well, one of the things is there's really no unity here at this time within the working class. We also see women at this time who are working within these fields, mainly in this unskilled area as domestic servants. The number of domestic servants grew rapidly at this time. As you can imagine, it was very difficult, hard work for low pay. Also, women were constantly in danger of sexual exploitation at this time. As you can see here, here's an advertisement, for someone who's seeking 2 servants. Of course, the middle and upper class within society, that's one way that you could separate yourself, was by the number of servants that you had working for you. The higher number of the servants, the more affluent that you at least were perceived as being. Some women continue to work at home in the sweated industry, where they were paid by the piece instead of by the hour. So some women continued to work at home, almost like in the cottage industry. Pay was, probably a little bit worse, and they would get paid, per piece created for the entrepreneur, but overall, life was pretty difficult for the unskilled working woman at this time. One of the last things I want to talk about with this brief lesson today is the working class leisure and religion. Despite their limited resources, the working class sought fun and recreation, and they definitely found both. Some of the things they liked doing most, and this is going way back for some time, is the working class enjoyed their drinks. Drinking remained as the favorite leisure activity that caused much angst in the homes of the working class. As you can imagine, as alcoholism continued to rise at this time, so would abusive behavior and poverty. Important to keep in mind still one of those important cultural aspects of Europeans at this time. However, we do see something interesting with drinking. It did become, public drinking became much more accepted at this time, and even within the middle class, you would see men and women going out from time to time to enjoy a drink of alcohol, where in the past that would be frowned upon, especially for women, where the social drink is becoming a little bit more accepted at this time, even though the middle class would definitely still look down upon those who are becoming extremely intoxicated in public. Social drinking is becoming a little bit more widely accepted. Sports and music were also popular at this time. We do notice a decline of the cruel sports that we talked about in the past, things like bull baiting and cockfighting, those blood sports that we noticed in the past. We don't see them as prevalent at this time. We do see things like racing and soccer and some of those modern sports that we know today are becoming more and more popular among the working class at this time. We also see music halls and vaudeville theaters like the one pictured over here are popular. In vaudeville, or just songs at the time, a few popular themes would be drunkenness, premarital sex, marriage difficulties, and the infamous mother-in-law. Those would be popular vaudeville acts or different songs, music might have some of those as themes. I suppose if we really researched that today, what themes would different music have today? Maybe boyfriends, girlfriends breaking up, or love themes. Neat to think about that in terms of today, what would be most prevalent. And also religion continued to play a dominant role within society. It looked a little bit different between the classes. Sometimes the working class felt like Catholicism and religion were kind of looking down upon them. Some people felt like it was a middle class value, but of course religion still remained an important aspect of European society at this time. So that pretty much concludes the lesson today about life after industrialization for the people within Europe. Noted here is a popular picture, and this picture is actually featured in the Art Institute of Chicago. But life after industrialization for Europe, we definitely see the social classes, especially with the factory workers, the working lower class, not really unifying together. That's an important aspect that we need to remember. Marx predicted they would come together, they don't. So keep that in mind, and we see that that wide disparity in wealth among the classes. So keep that in mind as well. I hope this was helpful, and I will look forward to seeing you in class. Have a good day.